Shadow of War by Tom Maddox. Chapter 1: Into the Inferno. The night in the war-torn city was alive with chaos. The air was thick with the acrid scent of smoke, the distant echoes of explosions and gunfire reverberating through the narrow streets. Shadows moved in every corner as soldiers and civilians alike fought for their lives. In the heart of it all, a small, elite team of special operations soldiers crouched on a rooftop, their eyes scanning the horizon. The team, known only by their call signs, had been dropped into the city under the cover of darkness. Their mission was straightforward: find and eliminate high-value targets embedded within the enemy's ranks. But as they watched the fires raging below them, there was a gnawing sense of unease in the pit of Sergeant Cole's stomach. He'd been in more firefights than he cared to count, but tonight felt different. Tonight, there was something more at stake than just survival. "Team, report in," Cole muttered into his comms, his voice low and steady. "Ready, Sergeant," came the clipped reply from Sergeant Jacobs, their demolitions expert, crouched beside a makeshift barricade of debris. "All set," said Private Carter, the team's sharpshooter, his rifle cradled tightly in his hands as he peered through his scope at the dark streets below. "Same here," added Lieutenant Harris, their intelligence officer, scanning their mission maps on a tablet, eyes darting between the device and the surroundings. Cole nodded, his gaze flicking over the skyline. He adjusted his gear, tightening his vest and checking his weapon, the familiar weight of the M4 carbine comforting against his side. The mission briefing had been clear: locate the enemy's supply routes, eliminate the targets, and get out undetected. Simple enough for a team of their caliber, but as they prepared to move deeper into the city, Cole couldn't shake the feeling that something had gone terribly wrong. "Let's move," Cole ordered, breaking the tension. His voice was calm, authoritative, as he signaled for the team to move out. The team dropped down from the rooftop, moving silently through the alleyways, their boots barely making a sound against the cracked pavement. They stayed in the shadows, blending into the ruined cityscape, their senses heightened with every step. The moonlight barely pierced the smog and dust that hung thick in the air, casting an eerie glow over the devastation. As they moved deeper into the heart of the city, the sound of distant gunfire grew louder. The faint scent of burning rubber and flesh lingered in the air, mixing with the metallic tang of blood. Every corner seemed to hold an ambush, and the weight of the mission pressed down on Cole's shoulders. There were too many unknowns, too many risks. Their objective was a fortified building on the other side of the city, a government building believed to house the key figures in the enemy's command structure. The intel was vague at best, but it had been enough to warrant a strike. What they hadn't been told was why the enemy had been so quiet lately. Why had they stopped moving? What were they hiding? "Sergeant," Carter whispered, his voice barely audible over the comms. "I've got a heat signature. 1, maybe 2, on the roof ahead." Cole's pulse quickened. It wasn't unusual to find enemy patrols in the area, but something about this felt off. He motioned for the team to stop. "Stay low," Cole ordered. "Jacobs, get your charges ready. Harris, keep your eyes peeled for anything out of the ordinary." The team spread out, taking cover behind debris and collapsed structures. The distant heat signatures flickered on Carter's thermal scope, still moving. They weren't alone in this city, but that was nothing new. The enemy was everywhere, lurking in the shadows, waiting to strike. Carter's voice crackled over the comms again. "There's something strange, Sergeant. They're moving in a pattern, not random. It's almost like they're waiting for us." Cole's gut twisted. They had been briefed on the enemy's tactics, but this wasn't part of the plan. It didn't make sense. They were supposed to be hunting down high-value targets, not being hunted themselves. "Stay sharp," Cole muttered, signaling for the team to move forward. "Carter, take the shot if you get a clean line. Everyone else, hold position." The silence of the city was deafening as the team crept forward, the air thick with tension. Every step felt like it could be their last. When they reached the base of the building, Cole signaled for Jacobs to plant explosives on the reinforced doors. The demolition expert worked quickly, setting the charges with precise movements. The seconds stretched on like hours as the team waited. Then the world erupted. The explosion ripped through the night, sending debris flying in all directions. Cole's heart pounded in his chest as he took cover, rifle raised, scanning the area for threats. His ears rang from the blast, but the team had trained for moments like this. They didn't hesitate. They moved. Gunfire erupted from inside the building as enemy soldiers poured out, weapons raised, their faces twisted in rage. Cole returned fire, his shots landing with deadly accuracy. But as he cut down one enemy after another, a strange thought gnawed at the back of his mind. This wasn't just a mission anymore. Something bigger was unfolding, something none of them could predict. And if they didn't find out what it was soon, they wouldn't make it out of the city alive. "Move! Move!" Cole shouted, pulling his team forward. "We're not done yet." As the team pushed further into the heart of the building, the sounds of gunfire grew more intense. Their enemies were numerous, and the ambush was not going to end easily. Yet Cole couldn't shake the feeling that the real danger was yet to come. The deeper they went into the building, the more it felt like they were being drawn into something much darker than they had ever imagined. And then, as they reached the second floor, Cole found it. The file, hidden in a locked drawer, sealed with an emblem he didn't recognize. It was a government dossier, but not one they were supposed to have. It was labeled Operation Shadow. His heart skipped a beat. The name echoed in his mind, the implications racing through his mind faster than he could process them. This wasn't just about enemy forces anymore. It was about betrayal, deception, and the truth they hadn't been prepared to face. "Get the dossier. We're leaving," Cole ordered, his voice cold as he slammed the drawer shut. "Now." As the team retreated, the sound of boots echoing behind them, Cole's mind raced. The mission was over, but it was only just beginning. The war outside had been hell, but the true battle had just started. Chapter 2: Beneath the Surface. The team had barely managed to escape the building before the enemy reinforcements arrived. The explosion had drawn more attention than they had anticipated, and now the streets were a maelstrom of chaos. Sirens wailed in the distance, and gunfire crackled through the smoke-filled air, punctuating the night like the violent rhythm of a heart about to stop. But the real danger wasn't in the firefights erupting around them. It was in the document Sergeant Cole carried tightly in his backpack. The file labeled Operation Shadow weighed heavily on his mind. They'd fought their way through the building's collapsing corridors for it, and now, with it in hand, the true weight of their mission had begun to sink in. This was no longer about taking down enemy targets. This was about survival and understanding just how deep the rabbit hole went. "Sergeant, we need to move," Private Jacobs said, his voice tight with urgency. He was the demolitions expert, but tonight, the explosives in his pack felt more like an afterthought. His hands fumbled with his gear as he scanned their surroundings. They were exposed. It was only a matter of time before the enemy found their trail. "Copy that," Cole replied, his voice low. He checked his map, assessing their route. The extraction point was still miles away, but they couldn't afford to wait any longer. Their path had been cut off. The enemy was everywhere. "Lieutenant Harris, you're with me," Cole ordered. "Jacobs, Carter, keep us covered from behind." The team had trained for situations like this. They were soldiers, survivors. But this mission had already pushed them beyond their limits. They'd been sent here to execute a standard mission: find and neutralize enemy operatives, gather intel, and return to base. But now they were in the middle of a deadly web of betrayal, surrounded by enemies both foreign and familiar. Carter, the team sniper, crouched low behind a burnt-out car, his eyes scanning the dark horizon through the lens of his rifle scope. "Movement at 3 o'clock," he reported, his voice calm despite the growing intensity of the situation. Cole's gaze darted to the right, his finger brushing against the trigger of his M4 carbine. But before he could give the order, Harris's voice cut through the tension. "Sergeant, we need to talk," Harris said, pulling Cole aside with a grim expression. He motioned for the rest of the team to keep moving. "Something's wrong. This Operation Shadow, it's not what we were told. I've seen that emblem before." Cole's heart skipped a beat. He'd noticed Harris's strange behavior earlier, the quick glances he cast at the dossier, the subtle twitch of his hand when he first laid eyes on it. But he hadn't had the time to address it. Now, however, it seemed that Harris was about to lay it all on the table. "What are you talking about?" Cole asked, his voice low, eyes still scanning the streets. "Operation Shadow isn't just some enemy operation," Harris replied, his voice laced with tension. "I've seen that logo before, back when I was with the CIA. It's linked to a covert mission, one that was wiped clean from the records, all trace of it deleted." Cole frowned. "Wiped clean?" "Yes," Harris continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "It was a black operation, one that was supposed to stay buried. But it's not. And now we've just stumbled right into it." Cole's pulse quickened as the weight of Harris's words sank in. This wasn't just about the enemy anymore. They were in the middle of something much larger, something far more dangerous. "I don't care what it was, Harris," Cole said, his voice firm. "What matters now is getting us out of here alive. The rest of it can wait until we're back at base." Harris hesitated for a moment before nodding, but Cole could see the doubt in his eyes. The team was fractured, and the cracks were beginning to show. They moved swiftly, the sound of their boots muffled by the thick dust and debris strewn across the city's desolate streets. The extraction point was close, but every corner they turned only seemed to bring them deeper into enemy territory. The enemy wasn't the only threat, though. There was something more sinister at play, a game, and they were the unwitting players. As they rounded a corner, the sudden sound of a gunshot cracked through the night air. Carter fell, his sniper rifle clattering to the ground. Blood oozed from a wound on his side. "Contact. Right side." Jacob shouted, his voice strained as he dropped to one knee and returned fire. Cole's heart raced. It was happening. They were being hunted. "Carter, can you move?" Cole yelled, rushing to his teammate's side. Carter's eyes were glazed over, his breathing shallow. "Good, Sergeant. Just get us out of here." "Stay with me," Cole said, grabbing Carter's rifle and slinging it over his shoulder. He motioned for the team to keep moving, his mind racing as they pushed forward. They had to keep moving. If they stopped, they'd be sitting ducks. The team pushed through the streets, dodging gunfire and explosions, their bodies soaked with sweat and grime. The city around them was a battlefield, every corner a potential death trap. But the real battle was the one they couldn't see, the one being fought within their own ranks. Trust was slipping away. Harris had already voiced his suspicions, and now Cole was starting to wonder if there was more truth to it than he had first thought. There was something rotten at the core of this mission, and the deeper they dug, the more likely it seemed that there was no way out. The streets grew quieter as they neared the extraction point. The sounds of distant gunfire faded, but the tension in the air was palpable. The calm before the storm. It was too easy. "I've got a bad feeling about this," Jacobs muttered, his eyes scanning the dark buildings that loomed overhead. Cole nodded, unable to shake the unease that gnawed at him. They were close, but that didn't mean they were safe. They reached the alleyway that led to the extraction point. Cole's hand hovered over his radio, ready to signal for the extraction when the unmistakable sound of a helicopter blade reached his ears. But it wasn't their extraction. It was the enemy's. "Stay down," Cole hissed. The team scattered into the shadows as a helicopter came into view, its spotlight cutting through the night. It was hovering just above them, its silhouette outlined against the starless sky. From the darkened windows, figures with rifles were scanning the ground. Cole's mind raced. They were trapped. Every path had been blocked. The walls were closing in. He motioned for the team to follow him as they retreated further into the shadows. They had one chance left: outwit the enemy, escape the trap, and make it back to the rendezvous point. But in a city like this, survival didn't come easy, and betrayal was always lurking just beneath the surface. Chapter 3: The Hidden Enemy. The alleyway was narrow, and the walls felt like they were closing in around them. Sweat dripped down Cole's face as he crouched low, trying to steady his breathing. The helicopter's spotlight still cut through the darkness, its blinding light scanning every corner, every crevice. The team remained as still as statues, their movements barely perceptible, holding their breath as the light passed over them. "I don't like this, Sergeant," Private Jacobs whispered, his voice tight with suppressed panic. "We're sitting ducks." Cole nodded grimly. "Stay low. Don't move until the light's off us." They waited in the shadows, the sound of the helicopter blades growing louder, a constant reminder of the danger closing in. The low hum of the rotor blades mixed with the distant echo of gunfire and explosions, all of it blending together in a cacophony of war. But it was the silence of their alleyway, the quiet hum of their own hearts racing, that made everything feel so much more dangerous. Minutes passed, each one dragging on as if time itself had slowed to a crawl. The helicopter was moving slowly, its spotlight sweeping the ground again and again. But it was only a matter of time before it found them. Cole's mind raced, weighing their options. They could try to make a run for it, but that would be suicide. The team wasn't ready for a full-on firefight with an entire enemy unit on the ground, and the extraction point was still too far. "Sergeant," Lieutenant Harris whispered from beside him, his eyes scanning the alley. "I think we need to split up. Draw their attention away from each other. We could cover more ground, maybe find a way out." Cole's brow furrowed as he considered the suggestion. It was risky, splitting the team, but it might be their only option. If they stayed together, they'd be an easy target for the helicopter's crew. If they split up, they'd have a better chance of confusing the enemy. But Harris's suggestion made Cole uneasy. He had his doubts about Harris's loyalty, and every time the lieutenant spoke, the words seemed to carry an edge, like he knew more than he was letting on. "Stay focused, Harris," Cole replied, his voice low and steady. "We move together, or we don't move at all." Harris didn't argue, but Cole could see the flicker of something in his eyes. The same unease Cole felt growing in his gut. They couldn't afford to split up. Not now. Not when they were so close to the extraction point. The helicopter passed overhead again, the lights sweeping across the alley, but this time it didn't stop. It moved farther down the street, its search widening. Cole seized the opportunity. "Move!" he hissed. "Now!" He motioned for the team to move with him as they slipped out of the alley and into the crumbling remnants of the city streets. Every step felt like it could be their last. The buildings around them were in ruins, windows shattered, doors hanging off their hinges. There was no cover here, no place to hide if they were spotted. Just a barren, open wasteland of concrete and steel. They stayed low, moving quickly but cautiously, their eyes scanning the street for any sign of danger. The helicopter's spotlight was still moving, but it was getting farther away. They were close to the extraction point now, just a few hundred meters ahead. It was within reach, if they could make it. But the feeling in Cole's chest told him something wasn't right. They were being hunted, and the real threat wasn't just the helicopter or the enemy soldiers on the ground. No, the true danger was much closer than that. It was within their own ranks. As they moved down a narrow street, Cole noticed Harris falling behind. The lieutenant was slowing his pace, his head down, his eyes darting to the left as though watching for something in the shadows. "Lieutenant," Cole called, keeping his voice low. "Move up. We need to stick together." Harris looked up, his expression unreadable. He nodded curtly and picked up the pace, but Cole saw the hesitation in his movements. Something was off. "Keep your head in the game, Harris," Cole muttered under his breath. But the lieutenant didn't respond. They reached the edge of the street, where a destroyed building provided them with a small amount of cover. Cole glanced around, ensuring no one was nearby, and then gave the signal to stop. The extraction point was just across the street, at the edge of a broken-down highway. The chopper was still circling, but its spotlight had passed them for now. They had a small window. "Jacobs, take point," Cole ordered. "Carter, your rear guard. Keep your eyes open. The rest of us stay in the middle. We move fast." The team nodded in unison, falling into their positions. They were close, so close to getting out. As they began to cross the street, Cole's instincts flared. Something was wrong. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up, and his eyes flicked to Harris once again. The lieutenant was now at the rear of the group, his movements slow, almost deliberate. Why isn't he keeping up? Cole's hand instinctively gripped his rifle tighter. His mind raced. It was possible that Harris was just distracted, trying to keep an eye on their perimeter. But Cole didn't trust it. Not anymore. "Hold up," he said, his voice sharp. The team froze in place. Cole's gaze locked with Harris's. The lieutenant's eyes widened for a fraction of a second before he quickly masked his reaction. But it was enough. Cole knew. "You knew," Cole said, his voice low but unmistakably fierce. "You knew what we were walking into." The others were confused, looking between Cole and Harris, but Cole couldn't tear his gaze away from the lieutenant. Harris's jaw clenched, and for a long moment he didn't speak. Then he took a step back, his hand moving toward the sidearm on his hip. "Sergeant," Harris said, his voice steady but cold, "you don't understand. This was never about you. This was never about the mission. It was about survival. Survival for the people who truly run this war." Cole's heart pounded. He had been right all along. Harris had known. The mission wasn't what they had been told. The secrets were far deeper than they could have imagined. Before Cole could react, Harris pulled out his sidearm and aimed it directly at him. "You've got one choice now, Sergeant," Harris said, his voice sharp. "Either you walk away from this, or I make sure you don't leave this city alive." A tense silence filled the air. The team was caught in the middle of something they couldn't understand, and now it seemed there was no way out. The enemy wasn't the only one hunting them, and betrayal had just found its way into their ranks. Chapter 4: A Fragile Alliance. The cold steel of the barrel pressed against Cole's chest, his breath shallow, his mind racing. Every muscle in his body screamed for action, for movement, but he couldn't. Not yet. Not with Harris standing there, a traitor now in their midst. The realization of the betrayal weighed heavier than any gunfire or explosion. The rest of the team was paralyzed, their eyes darting between Cole and Harris, unsure of what to do. Jacobs was the first to recover, his hand instinctively shifting toward his own weapon, but Cole held up a hand. "No," Cole said, his voice steady despite the chaos swirling in his mind. "We don't shoot unless we have to." Harris's lips curled into a tight smile, and he took a small step back, the gun still leveled at Cole. "You're the one who doesn't understand, Sergeant. This isn't about us anymore. This is about the people pulling the strings, the ones you'll never see, the ones who control everything. Cole's heart hammered in his chest, but he forced himself to keep his cool. What are you talking about, Harris? His voice came out low, almost a growl, every word soaked in disbelief and anger. What strings? Who's pulling them? Doesn't matter, Harris replied, his eyes glinting with something unreadable. You'll never get to the truth, not alive. They'll make sure of it. The truth. The truth that had been buried beneath layers of lies, the truth that had brought them here, to this ruined city, to this fragile moment of uncertainty. But Cole wasn't about to let Harris win. He forced his hand to relax, keeping his grip loose on his rifle. Every move needed to be calculated. Every step was a risk. You're going to tell me everything, Harris. Now, or I'll make you. Harris chuckled darkly, his finger tightening slightly on the trigger. I don't have time for this, Sergeant. You think you can stop me? You think you have the control here? You've been blind the whole damn time. Cole's mind flashed back to the briefings, to the mission they had been sent on. It was supposed to be a simple extraction, a clean job. But Harris's cryptic words were starting to make more sense now. The mission had been a cover, a distraction, and Harris had been playing a game that Cole didn't even know existed. Tell me, Cole demanded again, his voice quieter now, but more dangerous. He could feel the tension thickening in the air. Why are you doing this? What's your endgame? Harris took another step back, his eyes never leaving Cole's. You think you're the only one who has a reason to fight, to survive? You have no idea what they'll do to you once they have you, once they know you're a threat. Cole narrowed his eyes, his grip tightening on his weapon, his patience slipping. Who is it, Harris? Who's pulling your strings? Harris hesitated for a moment, his eyes flickering with uncertainty before he spoke again, his voice barely above a whisper. The syndicate. The syndicate? Cole repeated, disbelief filling his voice. You're working with them? The ones who... Don't act like you don't know, Harris snapped, cutting him off. They've been pulling the strings of this war from the start. Every faction, every gunfight, every life lost. It's all part of their plan. A cold chill ran through Cole's body as the pieces began to fall into place. The syndicate. They were the ones behind the scenes, the shadowy organization that thrived in the chaos of war, pulling the strings and profiting from bloodshed. They were the puppeteers, and Cole had unknowingly stepped into their game. But why Harris? Cole asked, his voice a mix of disbelief and fury. Why are you helping them? You know what they do. Harris's eyes hardened, his expression turning steely. I don't have a choice. None of us do. They have leverage. They have everything. And if I don't do what they say, they'll make sure my family's next. The revelation hit Cole like a punch to the gut. He knew what it was like to be in a position where the stakes were too high, where your family's safety was the price of your survival. But to sell out for that reason, to betray his team, his country, it was something Cole couldn't understand. Harris's finger twitched on the trigger again, the gun still aimed at Cole. But before either of them could make a move, a voice broke through the tension, sharp and cutting. Put the gun down, Harris. Jacob's voice rang out from behind Cole. Now. Cole's eyes flicked to Jacob's, who had finally regained his composure. Jacobs had his rifle aimed at Harris now, his hands steady, his face hard with determination. Harris turned his head slowly, his expression a mixture of defiance and resignation. You think you can stop me? You think you can just take me down? Jacob's stance didn't falter. I don't want to kill you, Harris, but I will if I have to. There was a long silence as the two men stared each other down. The air felt heavy, thick with the weight of their choices. Harris, Cole said, his voice low, his tone full of command. You don't have to do this. Drop the weapon and we can work this out. There's still time. For a moment, it seemed like Harris might give in, his finger loosening slightly on the trigger. But then his expression shifted. His eyes became cold, distant. No, he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. It's too late for that. It's been too late for a long time. Without warning, Harris turned and bolted, disappearing into the ruins of the city before anyone could stop him. The team was left standing there, unsure of what to do next. The weight of Harris's betrayal hung heavily in the air, and the mission had just become far more complicated than anyone had imagined. Cole stood still for a moment, his heart pounding. This wasn't just about survival anymore. They weren't fighting for just the extraction anymore. They were fighting for the truth. And if they wanted to make it out of this alive, they had to uncover the syndicate's plans and stop them before it was too late. Move out, Cole barked, his voice sharp. We've got to find Harris. He's our only chance to get to the bottom of this. The team nodded, their faces grim but resolute. They knew this mission was no longer about following orders. It was about surviving the shadows that loomed over them. And if they were going to outlast the coming storm, they had to be ready for anything. The hunt for the truth had just begun. And in this city of ruins, nothing was what it seemed. Chapter 5. Into the Abyss. The oppressive silence of the war-torn city had settled back in after Harris's disappearance, but the feeling of unease hung thick in the air, suffocating everything it touched. The team moved through the crumbling buildings like ghosts, their steps calculated, their eyes scanning every shadow. No one spoke. Words seemed too fragile in a place where the very walls could betray you. Cole led the way, his senses sharpened, his rifle cradled in his arms. The skyline was nothing but jagged remnants of the once thriving city, a grim reminder of what had been lost. But Cole's mind wasn't on the ruins. It was on Harris, the traitor who had betrayed them to the syndicate, the man who had been one of their own. The weight of betrayal still lingered in the pit of Cole's stomach, gnawing at him, but he forced it down. Now wasn't the time for emotions. There was a job to be done, and they had to find Harris, the only person who knew the truth about the syndicate and their plans. The truth that could destroy everything they had fought for. Stay alert, Cole said quietly, glancing over his shoulder at the team. Harris knows we're coming. He'll be expecting us. Jacobs, always the silent professional, gave a sharp nod, his eyes scanning the alleyways around them. Even in the chaos of war, he had a way of staying calm, focused on the task at hand. Behind him, Ruiz and Turner kept their rifles ready, their hands steady. But Cole could see it in their eyes. Doubt, fear. The mission had just become a whole lot more dangerous, and they weren't sure what to expect anymore. The team moved forward, advancing through the shattered streets. It was eerily quiet, too quiet. The constant hum of distant artillery fire, the crackle of radio static, the screams of a city dying, all of it had disappeared. The city was holding its breath, and so were they. As they approached a collapsed building, Cole signaled for them to stop. He crouched low, his hand held up in a gesture for them to stay still. His eyes darted across the desolate landscape, looking for any sign of movement. His instincts told him they were being watched. "We're close," he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. "I can feel it." "Cole," Jacob said, his voice tinged with concern. "We need to be careful. Harris might be expecting us, but what if we're walking straight into a trap?" Cole didn't answer immediately. His gaze locked on a distant figure, a silhouette barely visible in the haze of smoke that filled the streets. It was just a shadow, a fleeting shape that could be nothing more than the wind, but his gut told him otherwise. "Cover me," Cole ordered. He didn't wait for confirmation. He was already on the move, slipping into the shadows, moving quickly but quietly. His heartbeat pounded in his ears, but he focused on the task at hand. He couldn't afford to be distracted. The team followed, moving in formation, their weapons ready. The distance between them and the figure in the distance was closing quickly. Each step brought them closer to the unknown. Cole's mind raced with thoughts of Harris. What was the man planning? Was he just a pawn in the syndicate's game, or had he chosen this path willingly? And if the syndicate was pulling the strings, what would they do to Cole and his team if they got too close to the truth? As they neared the figure, Cole's hand tightened around the rifle. The silhouette shifted, and for a moment Cole thought it might be Harris. But the figure turned sharply, disappearing behind a wrecked building before Cole could confirm anything. Harris? Turner whispered, her voice tight with anticipation. No. Stay sharp, Cole replied, his voice low. It's a decoy. He's trying to lead us into a trap. The team moved faster now, their pace quickening. They had to keep their wits about them. They couldn't afford to fall for Harris's tricks again. They reached the building where the figure had vanished, a crumbled structure that once might have been a store. The air smelled of ash and burning metal, the ground littered with debris from the constant shelling. Cole crouched low, his eyes scanning the area as the rest of the team fanned out, covering all possible angles. It was then that they heard it. A faint sound, almost imperceptible at first, but it grew louder, a voice, distant but unmistakable. Did you think you could escape? The voice came from above. Without thinking, Cole's head snapped upward, his eyes searching the broken windows above. There, in the shattered remnants of the second floor, stood Harris, his silhouette framed by the fading light. But it wasn't just him. Behind him in the shadows were more figures, armed men, dressed in the black uniforms of the syndicate. They were waiting, poised, ready to strike. Shit, Jacobs cursed under his breath. It's a trap. Harris, you don't have to do this, Cole called up to him, his voice steady, despite the rising tension in his chest. Come down. We can work this out. You don't want to do this. Harris's eyes met Cole's, his face unreadable. For a moment there was silence, the tension hanging in the air like a storm about to break. You never understood, did you? Harris said, his voice carrying down to them. I'm not the one who has to answer to you, Cole. I answer to them. The syndicate. They hold all the cards. Before Cole could respond, the gunfire erupted. The world seemed to explode around them. The sound of bullets tearing through the air, the crackle of suppressors, the hiss of ricochets. It was chaos, pure and unrelenting. Cole dove for cover, his heart pounding in his chest as he scrambled for the safety of a collapsed wall. The rest of the team followed, their training kicking in as they returned fire. Cole peeked over the edge of his cover, his eyes narrowing. Harris was still there, standing tall, but he wasn't firing. His men, however, were relentless. They moved quickly, expertly, their shots controlled and precise. The syndicate had trained them well. We need to take them out, Jacob shouted, his voice strained with urgency. Before they flank us. Cole nodded, his mind already racing with options. The team was pinned down, and the syndicate's men were closing in. Harris might have been the one to bring them here, but it wasn't Harris who would make them survive this fight. On my mark, Cole said, his voice low but commanding. We push forward hard and fast. We take them out one by one. The team nodded in unison, the bond between them unspoken but strong. Cole took a deep breath, his finger resting lightly on the trigger. Go. The team surged forward, rifles raised, weapons blazing as they cut their way through the syndicate's men. The sound of gunfire was deafening, but Cole didn't focus on the chaos. His eyes never left Harris, who still stood above them, watching it all unfold. The truth was out there, but getting to it, getting out of this alive, was going to be harder than anyone could have imagined. Chapter 6: The Edge of Betrayal. The firefight had left the air thick with dust and smoke, the acrid scent of gunpowder lingering in the ruined city. The sound of gunfire faded into the background as Cole crouched behind a collapsed wall, catching his breath. His heart pounded in his chest, adrenaline still surging through him like electricity. The team had fought their way through, but not without casualties. The Syndicate's men had been relentless, and their ambush had almost been their undoing. Status? Cole's voice was a growl as he motioned for the team to move into position. His eyes scanned the scene, looking for any movement, any signs that the Syndicate was still lurking in the shadows. Jacobs was the first to respond, his tone grim. We've got 2 down, but we're still in this. Turner's got a graze on her side. It's nothing serious. Ruiz is patched up. For now. Cole nodded. We keep moving. The silence that followed was suffocating, the weight of the moment hanging heavy on Cole's shoulders. They were alive, but that didn't mean they were safe. The Syndicate had shown its hand, and it wasn't done with them yet. You sure he's still up there? Jacobs asked, his voice tight with concern. Cole glanced up at the broken building where Harris had been moments before. The silhouette of his former comrade was gone, but Cole couldn't shake the feeling that Harris was still watching them, still waiting for the right moment to strike. He could feel it in his bones. The betrayal ran deeper than he had imagined. Harris wasn't just a pawn. He was the key to everything. I'm sure, Cole replied, his voice cold. And we're not leaving here until we find him. They moved through the crumbling streets, sticking to the shadows, their footsteps muffled by the constant hiss of distant gunfire. The war-torn city around them seemed to close in as they pressed forward, each corner hiding danger, each building a potential trap. Cole's thoughts were a whirlwind of strategy, his mind racing as they approached the next alley. He knew the city well. He had been here before, but now it felt like a maze, every turn potentially leading them into a death trap. He had to trust his instincts, even as they faltered under the weight of the unknown. Harris was more than just a traitor. He was a ghost now, a figure in the shadows, manipulating the team's every move. But why? What had driven him to this? Get ready, Cole whispered, signaling for the team to fan out. This is it. The team moved into position, their weapons drawn, their eyes sharp. The alleyway ahead was dark, the remnants of the buildings casting long shadows. The tension was palpable, the air thick with the weight of what was about to come. A creak from above, a faint movement, caught Cole's attention. Without hesitation, he raised his rifle, his finger on the trigger, but before he could make the shot, a figure dropped down in front of him. It was too fast, too precise. Harris, Cole growled, his voice low with fury. Harris stood before them, his face a mask of cold indifference, his rifle slung across his back. He looked unchanged, still the same man who had fought alongside them, bled alongside them. But now he was the enemy, and that was a line Cole couldn't uncross. I told you, Cole, Harris said, his voice flat, almost empty. You never understood. This isn't just about us. It's bigger than that. Cole's grip on his rifle tightened. You sold us out. You sold your country out. All for what? Harris's eyes flickered briefly with something. Guilt, maybe. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared. He stepped closer, his gaze hardening. I didn't have a choice. None of us did. But I'm done fighting for the wrong side. The Syndicate. He stopped, almost as if considering his next words carefully. They know what's coming. They'll change everything. What are you talking about? Jacobs interjected, his voice sharp, trying to piece together the fragmented truth. What's the Syndicate's plan? Harris's lips curled into a thin smile, but it was devoid of humor. You'll find out soon enough. It's already in motion. You think the enemy is just the syndicate? It's bigger than that. There are bigger players involved, Cole. The whole damn world is changing and you're just too blind to see it. Cole's mind raced, the pieces of the puzzle falling into place in a way he hadn't anticipated. Harris had been involved in something far larger than any of them could imagine. The syndicate wasn't the end of the story. It was only the beginning. But Cole had no time to waste on Harris's cryptic ramblings. He stepped forward, his rifle raised, but before he could pull the trigger, a gunshot rang out from the other side of the alley. Cole's heart skipped a beat as the world exploded into chaos again. The sound of shuffling footsteps, the rustle of clothing, and a scream, Turner's voice, high-pitched with pain, echoed through the alley. "Damn it!" Cole shouted, spinning toward the sound. His rifle swung into position, but his attention was split. Harris had vanished, slipped back into the shadows like a ghost. "Move!" He barked at the team, urgency now replacing his calm demeanor. "Turner's down. We need to move." The team reacted instantly, rushing toward Turner, who was lying on the ground, clutching her side where a bullet had grazed her. The blood was starting to seep through her clothes, but she was still conscious, still alert. "I'm fine," she gasped, her voice strained. "Just a scratch." "Don't lie to me," Jacob snapped as he knelt beside her, quickly checking her wound. "This is a lot more than a scratch. We need to get you out of here." "No," Turner said, shaking her head, her eyes fierce despite the pain. "We can't leave until we finish this. Harris can't get away again." Cole's jaw clenched. He had wanted to find Harris, to confront him, but now it was clear. Harris wasn't just running. He was planning something bigger, and they couldn't afford to let him get away again. "We'll finish this," Cole said, his voice hardening. "But first, we get Turner to safety. Then we finish what we started." The team moved quickly, setting up a perimeter around Turner as Jacobs applied pressure to the wound. Cole's eyes darted around the darkening city. Harris was out there, waiting, scheming. But Cole wasn't going to let him slip away again. Not this time. This war, this betrayal, it wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about making sure that the truth didn't die in the shadows. Harris had crossed a line, and now Cole was going to make him pay. Chapter 7. The Hunter Becomes the Hunted. The pain in Turner's side still radiated with every breath, but her fierce determination pushed through the agony. The team had set up a temporary camp in an abandoned building, securing the area as best they could. The light outside was fading, and shadows crept longer, stretching over the debris-filled streets like dark fingers waiting to choke the life out of everything in their path. Cole sat across from Turner, his eyes never leaving the makeshift bandage around her wound. Every second that passed felt like they were growing closer to a deadly confrontation, and he knew he couldn't afford to hesitate any longer. "Don't worry about me," Turner's voice broke through his thoughts, raspy from pain. She met his eyes, her lips curling into a grim smile. "I'll be fine. Just don't let Harris get away again." "I won't," Cole promised, though his voice was heavy with the weight of that truth. It wasn't just Harris he was hunting anymore. It was the unseen forces behind him, the web of treachery that had started to unravel with each piece of information they uncovered. Jacobs and Ruiz were gathering what little supplies they had left, packing up their gear with a sense of urgency. Every movement felt tense, like they were waiting for the other shoe to drop. "We need to move," Jacobs said, looking up from his task. "We can't stay here much longer. The Syndicate's men are still out there, and if Harris's plan is anything like what we think it is, we're not safe here for long." Cole nodded, his mind already racing through the next steps. "We move out at dawn. Get as much rest as you can." The team made their way to the upper floor, using the broken window as a vantage point. Cole knelt by the shattered glass, scanning the streets below with his binoculars. The city, once alive with the sounds of daily life, was now in a shell, its ruins filled with the echoes of the past. There was nothing, no movement, nothing but the smoke in the air and the distant thundering of gunfire from a battle that seemed far away but was all too close. Cole clenched his jaw. Harris had disappeared in the labyrinth of this city, slipping through their fingers once again. But Cole had no illusions anymore. The game had changed. He wasn't chasing a fugitive anymore. He was chasing a mastermind, a man who had already planned his next move. As darkness fell, the tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. Cole felt the weight of his decisions bearing down on him. Harris wasn't just a traitor anymore. He was the key to something bigger, something darker. He wasn't acting alone, and Cole knew that every step forward only deepened the conspiracy they had stumbled into. "We've been compromised," Ruiz said, his voice low and steady. "Harris isn't just one of the syndicate's lackeys. He's working with someone else, someone who has the resources to keep us running in circles." Cole turned toward Ruiz, his eyes hard. "I know. I've known for a while. But we're not stopping until we figure out what's really going on." The plan had always been to find Harris and end it. But now it wasn't just about ending him. It was about uncovering the truth, no matter the cost. Suddenly, a sharp sound broke the silence. A faint, metallic click echoed from the alley below, and Cole's senses went on high alert. He didn't have to look twice to know it wasn't the wind or the city's groaning infrastructure. Someone was out there. Suddenly, a sharp sound broke the silence. A faint, metallic click echoed from the alley below, and Cole's senses went on high alert. He didn't have to look twice to know it wasn't the wind or the city's groaning infrastructure. Someone was out there. "Get down," Cole hissed, pulling Turner behind a nearby column as the rest of the team instinctively hit the floor. Through the cracked window, Cole could just make out a figure, a shadow, moving with purpose, keeping low to the ground. It wasn't one of their team. It wasn't one of the syndicate. No. This figure was too calculated, too deliberate. "Harris," Cole muttered under his breath. It had to be. Without hesitation, he signaled for the team to move. The time for subtlety had passed. They had to act fast before Harris made his next move. The team moved quickly, silently, sliding through the building's decrepit hallways and out the back exit into a darkened alley. Their weapons were drawn, their minds focused on the objective. The alley outside was narrow, claustrophobic, but the team moved through it like shadows, every footstep measured, every breath controlled. Cole led the way, his instincts on edge. Every corner could be a trap, every doorway a potential ambush. He had to be ready for anything. As they moved further into the city, the tension only grew. Every rustling leaf, every shifting shadow made his muscles tense, his senses alert. He wasn't just hunting Harris anymore. He was hunting a ghost, a man who could vanish in the blink of an eye and reappear when least expected. Then, out of nowhere, a gunshot rang out, deafening in the stillness of the night. Cole's heart skipped a beat as he ducked behind a concrete pillar. A ricochet hit the ground near his feet, sending up a spray of dust and gravel. "Ambush!" Jacob shouted, his voice tense. The team scattered, moving quickly to find cover. Gunfire erupted all around them, shattering the night's silence. The syndicate's men had them surrounded. Harris wasn't just waiting for them. He had orchestrated this, lured them into a trap. "Fall back!" Cole ordered, his voice hard and commanding. "We need to get out of here." But even as the team moved to retreat, Cole knew there was no escape. They were trapped in the middle of a deadly game, one where survival meant outwitting both enemies and friends. The sound of footsteps grew closer. Shadows lurked in every corner, and Cole's hand tightened around his rifle. He was done being the hunter. Now he would be the one to end this. They weren't running anymore. It was time to turn the tables. Stay close. We fight through. Cole's voice was steady, unshaken. This ends tonight. Chapter 8. The Last Stand. The crackling sound of gunfire echoed through the crumbling streets, blending with the eerie silence of the city. Cole's heart pounded in his chest as he crouched low behind a shattered concrete pillar, his eyes scanning the shadows. Every movement felt like it could be his last. Every decision he made was a gamble. The trap had been sprung, and now there was no way out. The team was split. Jacobs and Ruiz had taken up positions on either side of the alley, their rifles trained on the approaching enemy. Turner, though still injured, was kneeling by Cole's side, her hand steady on her sidearm, her eyes filled with a fierce resolve. "Stay sharp," Cole muttered, his voice a low growl as he peeked around the corner. The syndicate soldiers were closing in, too well organized, too calculated. There were more of them than he had anticipated, their dark figures creeping closer with every passing second. "Can't believe we're stuck in this mess," Ruiz whispered, his voice tense but controlled. "We can't let Harris win. Not now." "We won't," Cole replied, his fingers tightening around the grip of his weapon. He knew the stakes. He knew the cost. The mission was no longer just about Harris. It was about survival. It was about finding a way to get out alive and to make sure the syndicate paid for what they had done. The sound of boots hitting the ground grew louder. There was no more time for planning. The fight was already here. "On my mark," Cole whispered. His voice was steady, betraying none of the fear that clawed at the edges of his mind. "We hit them hard and fast. No hesitation." He looked at his team, locking eyes with each of them in turn. They nodded. Every one of them knew what they had to do. There was no way back, only forward. A breath, a beat of silence, and then Cole moved. The first soldier fell before he even knew what hit him. A precise shot from Ruiz that took him down in an instant. The rest of the enemy soldiers scattered for cover, their return fire kicking up dust and debris. Cole was already moving, darting from pillar to pillar, his team following his lead. Turner's voice rang out in the chaos, her shots precise and deadly. "Clear the left flank," she shouted, her arms steadied despite the pain. Her training was evident in every move she made, and Cole's heart swelled with a fierce pride for her. She wasn't just a soldier, she was a warrior. But the syndicate soldiers were no fools. They fought back with the ferocity of cornered animals, their assault coming in waves, one after another. For every soldier Cole's team dropped, two more appeared, their weapons flashing in the darkness. "Hold the line!" Cole shouted. His voice was raw with the tension of battle, but there was no room for panic. Not now. The battle raged on, a brutal game of cat and mouse, as Cole's team was pushed back further into the wreckage of the city. Each move, each decision felt like a death sentence. The only option was to keep fighting, to keep pushing forward. Suddenly, a loud explosion shook the ground beneath their feet. The force of it sent debris flying, knocking Cole off his feet. Pain exploded in his chest as he slammed into the concrete, the world spinning around him. Blood trickled from a cut above his eye, but there was no time to feel it. His mind raced, his instincts kicking in. "Cole," Turner's voice cut through the haze of pain. She was kneeling beside him, her hand on his shoulder. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine," he grunted, pushing himself up. His head swam, but there was no time for weakness. He had to focus. "They've breached the right flank," Ruiz shouted from across the street. He fired off a shot, taking down an enemy soldier, but it was clear they were losing ground. The syndicate was closing in, tightening their grip on them with every passing moment. Fall back, Cole commanded, his voice sharp. There was no more time for strategy. It was all about survival now. He grabbed Turner's arm and pulled her to her feet. We move now. They ran, weaving between the crumbling buildings, their footsteps a blur in the chaos of war. The gunfire never ceased, the roar of it filling their ears, but Cole kept his focus, his mind sharp and cold. There was only one goal now: get to Harris. He had to end this. He had to stop him before the entire mission fell apart. As they moved through the wreckage, a shadow fell over them. The unmistakable silhouette of Harris appeared at the end of the street, walking calmly toward them, his rifle slung over his shoulder. He was too calm, too composed for someone in the middle of a firefight. Cole's blood boiled at the sight. The traitor, the man who had led them into this nightmare. Harris! Cole shouted, his voice cutting through the gunfire. This ends now! Harris didn't flinch. Instead, he smiled, a cold, predatory smile that sent a chill down Cole's spine. I told you, Harris said, his voice dripping with mockery. You've already lost. In that moment, everything clicked into place. The traps, the ambushes. Harris had known all along. This wasn't just a mission, it was a setup. They were pawns in a game they hadn't even realized they were playing. But Cole wouldn't let it end like this. He couldn't. With one swift motion, he drew his sidearm and fired. The bullet pierced through the air, but Harris was already gone, ducking behind a column for cover. A sniper, another one of Harris's tricks. Get down, Cole shouted, pulling Turner behind a pile of rubble, just as another shot rang out. The bullet whizzed past, missing by inches. Cole's heart raced, but his mind was clear. He had one chance left. Harris was close, too close. He waited for the moment, every muscle in his body coiled and ready. And then, just as Harris exposed himself, Cole fired again. This time, the shot hit home. Harris collapsed, his body crumpling to the ground, the life draining from him in an instant. Target down, Cole said through clenched teeth. The weight of the moment settled over him. Harris was gone, but the battle wasn't over. The enemy was still out there, closing in. They were running out of time. But for the first time in hours, Cole allowed himself a moment to breathe. Harris was dead. The traitor was no longer a threat. Now, it was time to finish what they had started. Let's move, Cole said, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. This ends tonight. The team gathered around him, their resolve solidified in the face of victory and loss. They had one final mission to complete, and they would see it through no matter the cost. Chapter 9, The Edge of Collapse. The city felt like it was holding its breath, a stillness hanging heavy in the air as the aftermath of the firefight settled over them. Cole stood at the edge of a ruined rooftop, scanning the horizon with his rifle slung over his shoulder. The dust and smoke from the battle still lingered, curling up from the streets below like a ghostly reminder of the chaos that had unfolded. But for now, there was silence. Good shot, Turner said, her voice low as she approached from behind. She stood next to him, her eyes flicking to the wreckage below. She was visibly exhausted, her uniform torn and dirt-streaked, but there was no time to rest. Not yet. Not until it was over. Not good enough, Cole muttered, his gaze unwavering. Harris is dead, but we're still in the heart of it. We've got bigger problems now. Turner nodded grimly. The syndicate isn't going to just walk away. They'll regroup. They always do. A chill ran down Cole's spine as he thought of the threat that still loomed over them. The syndicate, ruthless and organized, wouldn't let them escape. They had one objective left: survive. and they had to move quickly. Where's the extraction point? Ruiz's voice came over the comms, breaking the tension in the air. Cole could hear the strain in his voice. It was clear the whole team was on edge. No one was untouched by the battle they'd fought so far. West side of the city. About a mile out, Cole answered. But we're not there yet. We need to clear the streets first. The thought of moving through the war-torn city felt like an impossible task. The syndicate had eyes everywhere, and the last thing Cole wanted was to walk right into an ambush. They were being hunted, and every step they took felt like it could be their last. Cole turned to Turner. You good to move? She nodded, though her face was pale, and there was a slight tremor in her hand as she checked her weapon. I'll make it. Let's just finish this. The team regrouped in the street below, using the shadows and the cover of collapsed buildings to conceal their movements. The sound of distant gunfire echoed from the city's outskirts, a constant reminder that the enemy was still out there. Every step was calculated, every movement deliberate. They knew they couldn't afford any mistakes. Keep your heads down, Cole instructed. We've got one shot at this. The streets had once been alive with the sounds of the city, children playing, merchants shouting their wares. Now, all that remained was a skeleton of what had been. The buildings were shells, the air thick with the smell of smoke and decay. It was a place where survival had become a game of inches, and one wrong move could cost everything. The group advanced cautiously, their rifles raised, eyes constantly shifting. Cole could feel the weight of their eyes on him, his decisions guiding their path. He had to keep them alive, no matter the cost. But the deeper they moved into the heart of the city, the more the weight of the situation pressed down on him. Suddenly a gunshot rang out from the far side of the street. It was followed by another and another, the sharp staccato of automatic fire shattering the quiet. They were under attack. The syndicate had found them. Move! Move! Cole shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. The team scrambled for cover, ducking behind the wreckage of a nearby building. Cole peeked around the corner, his rifle aimed at the street where the gunfire had come from. The syndicate soldiers were closing in from all sides, their movements methodical and practiced. They were ready for this. They'd been ready for hours. Where's our backup? Ruiz shouted, his voice tight with frustration. He fired off a few shots, but the enemy was out of range. Hold tight, Cole barked back, his mind racing. The extraction team isn't going to get here in time. We have to make it ourselves. Turner's voice came through the comms, calm but urgent. We need a distraction, Cole. Something to give us an opening. Cole's eyes flicked over the battlefield, searching for anything that could turn the tide. His mind raced with possibilities, and then, like a spark in the dark, the idea came to him. I've got an idea, he said, a cold resolve settling over him. But it's going to be dangerous. Without waiting for a response, Cole turned and sprinted toward the street's edge, his rifle raised. He had to get their attention, make them focus on him. If he could draw their fire, it would give Turner and Ruiz the opening they needed to advance. Stay down and wait for my signal, Cole commanded. I'll cover you. He moved fast, zigzagging through the wreckage, making himself a moving target. The enemy's soldiers opened fire immediately, their weapons roaring in the stillness. Cole ducked and weaved, using the ruined buildings to shield himself from the onslaught of bullets. His heart thundered in his chest, but he kept his focus. He had one goal: survive and get his team to safety. As he ran, Cole's mind flashed back to the moment when he first joined the military. Back then, he'd been a different man, idealistic, eager to prove himself. But now, after all that had happened, he had learned the only truth that mattered in this world: survive, no matter the cost. Cole reached the center of the street and, with a deep breath, He tossed a grenade into a nearby alley. The explosion was deafening, the shock wave knocking him off balance. It worked. The syndicate soldiers paused, their attention diverted. "Now! Move!" Cole shouted into the comms, his voice a sharp command. The team didn't hesitate. Turner and Ruiz took their chance, sprinting toward the extraction point with everything they had left. But Cole stayed behind, providing cover fire to keep the enemy's focus on him. The air was thick with the acrid smell of smoke and gunpowder as Cole fired, his shots precise and calculated. But there were too many of them. The enemy was closing in. "Almost there," Ruiz shouted, his voice strained. Cole's breath caught in his throat. He couldn't afford to fail now, not when they were so close. But then, as if fate had finally decided to break him, an enemy sniper took aim from a distant rooftop. Cole felt the bullet tear through his side, a searing pain that nearly knocked him off his feet. His vision blurred, and for a moment he thought he might pass out, but he couldn't. He couldn't stop now. With a grunt of pain, Cole took aim again, firing at the sniper's position. The shot rang true, and the sniper fell. "Go!" he shouted, his voice barely above a whisper. "Get out of here!" Turner and Ruiz were already halfway to the extraction point, but they turned back, concern flashing in their eyes. "Don't be stupid," Cole muttered through gritted teeth. "You've got a job to do." With one final glance over his shoulder, he collapsed behind a pile of debris. His team was safe. That was all that mattered. The roar of a helicopter's engines broke the stillness, signaling the end of the nightmare. The extraction team was here. But for Cole, the war was over. Chapter 10: The Final Stand. The city was a ruin, nothing more than shattered concrete and scorched earth. The sounds of battle had faded, leaving only the distant hum of helicopters and the crackling of fires. But amid the devastation, the mission was finally nearing its end. Cole could barely stand, the blood from his side staining his uniform a deep crimson. His vision blurred, and each breath felt like it took an eternity. But he wasn't about to give up. Not now. Not when his team was so close to safety. The air was thick with the acrid scent of gunpowder and burnt debris. His team, Turner, Ruiz, and the rest, were almost there. Just another 100 meters from the extraction point. The chopper was hovering above them, its blades cutting through the smoke-filled sky, ready to take them to safety. But Cole knew better than to hope for an easy end. The syndicate was still out there, and they would stop at nothing to ensure no one left this city alive. Every moment they spent out in the open was a gamble. "Ruiz! Turner! Move faster!" Cole's voice was hoarse, but it carried the weight of authority. His command was not just a suggestion, it was the difference between life and death. The two soldiers didn't hesitate. They sprinted toward the extraction point, their rifles at the ready, eyes darting from shadow to shadow. Cole watched them go, every instinct screaming at him to follow, but he knew he couldn't leave yet. He had one more job to do. The pain in his side was unbearable, but he gritted his teeth and focused. The sound of enemy footsteps was getting closer. They had made it too far to let the syndicate take them now. If anyone was going to survive this, it had to be them. Through the haze of smoke, Cole spotted movement. Two figures advancing toward the extraction point from the left. Enemy soldiers, weapons raised, ready to fire. With one last burst of adrenaline, Cole steadied his aim, ignoring the pain that shot through his body with every movement. He squeezed the trigger. The first soldier dropped, a clean shot to the head. The second turned, but Cole was faster. Another shot, and the threat was eliminated. But Cole didn't have the luxury of celebration. The sound of approaching vehicles told him there was more to come. They were closing in from the east, and the chopper was still a few hundred yards away, too far for them to make it safely without covering fire. Cole's hand shook as he called into the comms. Get to the chopper, now! I'll hold them off. Negative, came Turner's voice, urgent but firm. We're not leaving you behind. But Cole could hear the hesitation in her voice. She was out of options, and he knew it. If they didn't take this opportunity, they'd all be dead. The chopper wasn't going to wait forever. I'll be fine, Cole said through gritted teeth. I'm not going anywhere. Just get to that damn chopper. He watched as Turner and Ruiz reluctantly obeyed, their bodies tense as they moved forward, their eyes constantly scanning for the next threat. But Cole wasn't done yet. He couldn't afford to be. The enemy was almost upon them. Another wave of syndicate soldiers, this time more organized, more prepared. They moved through the smoke like shadows, creeping toward their target. But Cole had the high ground. He had the advantage. He took cover behind a burned-out vehicle, using the wreckage as a shield. His rifle was steady in his hands, and he waited. His breathing slowed, his focus sharp. He had one shot. He couldn't miss. As the enemy soldiers emerged from the smoke, Cole took aim. He fired. One down, two, three. His shots were precise, taking out the threats with surgical accuracy. But the more he fired, the more they came. A bullet grazed his shoulder, and Cole winced, the pain sharp and sudden. His vision blurred even more, but he refused to give in. Not now. Almost there, he muttered to himself, forcing his body to stay upright. Just a little longer. Through the smoke, he saw it, a flicker of movement at the far end of the street. A lone syndicate soldier taking aim at the retreating team. He had a clear shot. Without thinking, Cole adjusted his position, the pain in his side almost too much to bear. He steadied his breath and fired. The soldier dropped just as Turner and Ruiz reached the extraction point. Get in! Cole shouted into the comms, his voice hoarse and desperate. Now! Turner and Ruiz climbed into the helicopter, their faces etched with relief but filled with pain. They didn't look back, not even for a second. The door slid shut, and the helicopter began to rise, lifting them away from the war-torn city. But Cole wasn't ready to join them just yet. He was still out there, still fighting, and he would continue to fight until his last breath. The helicopter hovered overhead, its blades whipping the air, waiting for his signal. With one final shaky breath, Cole stood, his rifle at the ready. He fired another shot, just to make sure. The enemy was finally retreating, or so it seemed. And then, through the haze of smoke, Cole saw something. A figure, moving quickly toward him, dressed in black and carrying a large weapon. It was a syndicate operative, too fast, too well trained for Cole to take down in his current state. For a split second, time slowed. Cole's heart hammered in his chest, his thoughts racing. He couldn't make the shot. His vision blurred, the world around him spinning. He was losing control. But then, just as quickly as it had appeared, the figure dropped to the ground, a clean shot to the chest. Cole turned, and for the first time in what felt like forever, he saw Turner's eyes through the open door of the helicopter. Her rifle was still raised, her face tight with focus. Get in! She shouted again, her voice breaking through the chaos. Cole didn't wait any longer. He stumbled toward the helicopter, each step feeling heavier than the last. His body ached with every movement, and his breath came in ragged gasps. But he made it, barely. The helicopter's door slammed shut, and the world fell away as they soared into the sky. Below, the city burned, but Cole's mission was complete. His team was safe. And for the first time, as they flew into the horizon, he allowed himself to relax. It was over.